Hey, so last week I made a 4-hour video on my YouTube channel teaching people how to build apps with AI from scratch, right? And a lot of people that entered into my Telegram community kept on asking the same question: is vibe coding secure? Right now, I'm going to give you my honest answer, and I'll teach you how to build with AI like a pro in this video. So the first thing I'm going to say is this: saying is vibe coding secure, or would vibe coding make my app get hacked, is the wrong question in 2026. If you're using an advanced model like Claude and the rest, they write perfect code that humans can't even compete with. I'll tell you that. Now, so the right question is your own app secure? Because security is not a vibe coding question, it's a building question. Traditional devs write insecure code too. Now, and that thing I'll say is this: there are a lot of principles I can teach you, but based on the kind of app you are building, it can vary. Do you understand? There are a lot of small security vulnerabilities you might have that can differ from apps to apps. So this is the first question you need to ask, right? Now, the next thing is what people do when they want to start building apps. They jump straight into prompting, no architecture, no plan, everything. You just say, oh, build this app for me, build this Netflix app, or build this other app, and bam, the AI starts building. And that's the wrong way to build. And I'll tell you why is the wrong way to build before I tell you what you should do. That is because AI, if you've heard of tokens, I'm going to break it down for you. AI has what you call input tokens and output tokens, right? And now, for example, some of the top models have 200k tokens for inputs, and about sometimes more as low as 8,000 tokens for output. That means, tokens are basically a conversion of how much words the AI can recognize and characters they can understand, right? So that means they cannot infinitely understand every single thing you tell it to do. So if you give it a very large project, right, as it's thinking, at some point it's going to reach a limit. So it's going to try and compact or summarize the conversation so another AI agent can continue, not that same one. Another fresh memory it can continue working on that same project you give it. And most times, as it's hallucinating, it would now start messing up your project, because it might start second guessing what you said before, and you might not remember it because it has forgotten it. So that's a problem. So what you need to do instead is you need to plan first before you start building, right? Know your security model before you start coding. Separate front end from back end logic, and test constantly. Now, this is the 4 things you need to do, right? Now, if you talk about separating your sensitive logic from your front end, what does that mean? It means that every single function of your app, right, login, registration, all of them should be what you call an API call. Do you understand? And what that means is that most of this logic, you can deploy it to a cloud service. So you can see cloud, private service, etc. Now, most of these things I'm telling you, it's very easy for you to implement them, because you can just go into your AI agent and say, oh, I want to implement this function as a cloud service. I want to implement that function as a cloud service. Now, you can start with even the most core sections of your app. Now, every single app has a core section, a core functionality that people come to that app to come and use. For example, one of my apps here, the most important functionality that people come to use is to be able to plan their apps. They describe what they want to build, and my app generates an entire plan for them. That particular section is very sensitive to my product, right? So I need to make sure that it's a cloud service that the front end of my app can now read and consume or use. And now with that, I can do a lot of securing that logic here. Because if you try to secure it from the front end and you try and make front end calls, you make a lot of issues, or you make a lot of mistakes where hackers can easily look into your app or look into the code and then manipulate things here and there. So this is the first thing you need to start doing. So you can tell your AI agent today, this function, let it be an API call. That's the first thing you can do. Now, the second thing is plan the architecture before you write the code, right? Now, this is where I'm going to talk about my app, VisualPRD, right? So now, this is VisualPRD.com, and VisualPRD.com is a platform that I built to help non-technical people build AI apps that are secure from the beginning. Every technical detail about your app, you just come, when you sign up, the cheapest plan is $5, you click generate blueprint, and it builds out the entire blueprint of your app. For example, in this app here, you see that everything, all the entire build prompts are already generated. right? And everything, including security notes, I think are up to 400 plus prompts automatically generated by different AI systems or AI agents that take out time to discuss in depth about your project. So it takes up to 1 hour to generate a full blueprint. It takes its time, right? Now, once you are done with everything, now you can see every single thing that you need, the pages, the endpoints, the schema, everything. Now it automatically defines all your sensitive logic for you, right? And you can see all of them have implementation notes. And all you have to do is just click to your AI agent and bam, you export it to whatever AI agent you use, Lovable, Cursor, and it starts building everything out the right way. Then you can work on the front end however you want. So this would help you plan out your entire app. Now, if you don't want to use VisualPRD, you can use Claude Code, you can use ChatGPT to plan. But the thing is that it's not going to give you full context like VisualPRD would give you. Every single thing that you need at once. It's just going to give you high-level overview because VisualPRD uses a full agentic process to have multiple agents discuss about your project. Now, let's go back into the planning. Now, I'm going to, let me drag this up here. So the next thing is input validation. Now, this is another security principles that you need to understand if you're going to build in your apps. Now, every single time, for example, even in my app here, every single section in your app that has an input area, so somewhere that users type in, maybe login area, whatever, hackers can actually use these fields, these text fields. Any section has a text field to write, codes or commands that they can use to manipulate your backend, right? So if you're not careful, all you have to just say is, you tell your AI agent, please make sure all user inputs are validated and sanitized on the server side before any processing. Do you understand? You can say use a validation library, reject anything that doesn't match expected format. Now, this is a prompt you can give your AI agent and bam, it will start handling that functionality for you. But I'm sure you can see a pattern. If you plan the app you want to build, and you plan all the different pages, the login page is going to work, the sign up pages is going to work, this page, you see, that's what you mean by planning the architecture, the backend, everything. And you go over with your AI agent or you use VisualPRD to do it. All these different sections, you will break it down. So now when you're telling your AI agent, okay, for example, build the login page, you can say, make sure this happens, that happens, etc. That's how you build with AI. You break down the steps, step by step. You don't give it a high level task. And if you want to give it a high level task, you plan. Now, let me just do something quickly. AI agents are going to use, for example, I'm going to open up Claude Code. Right, most AI agents are going to use will have a plan mode. And for example, in Claude Code, their plan mode is just to toggle and you just say, plan mode. So if you tell it, okay, I want to build this, it can start building out everything for you, but to plan first before it starts building. Things like this, you break down all the features. So if you want to tell your AI agent to build something for you and tell you, okay, plan first, tell you what you want to build, let it plan before you even execute. And even with that, you still have to verify everything it does. That's what I mean by test, but we'll get into that shortly. Now, let's go back. So some kind of input fields are going to have would be text, number, email, right? Is it within expected lengths? So sometimes, now let me give an example. I was teaching a class about building a chat app. And in that class, when we were just working together, I was like, okay, so if you ask your AI agent, how can I make this functionality of sending a chat message secure? Or how can I make it secure? And you'll see, it talk about things like, well, and I'm teaching you how you can work with your AI agent, because if you're someone that doesn't understand security practices, asking the right questions, being curious like this would help you out a whole lot. So, okay, how can I make it secure? And, you see things like, if you're having a chat app like this, you have to limit the amount of characters a user can type. If they can type endlessly, they can basically have a bot that can spam your app with multiple characters and break your entire system, or maybe it cost you a whole lot of money, because if you are paying some kind of backend service to host your logic, of course, you're going to be paying when users send information to your backend or write something or read some information from your backend. And you want to make sure that you are limiting these things, right? Does it contain dangerous characters, etc.? And never validate on front end. So these are things you need to ask your AI agent. Next thing, rate limiting, right? This is another rule. Now, rate limiting stops people from hammering your app. Now, rate limiting means limit how many requests a user can make in a given window. So now I spoke about most functions. For example, if I go to this, in this VisualPRD here, you see that most of the logic or backend logic are API calls, if you may, right? So for example, if you come over here, a lot of the backend logic are API calls. For example, so authentication or user call, if someone is going to log into your app. Now this is an API call, so we're basically going to write some code. The AI writes some code and host it on the cloud, right? And that means that every single time we want to access something, the AI would call that particular API call and then make some kind of functionality happen in your app. Now here's the thing: if somebody can always tap a button and call a particular function, and they can do it multiple times, you can keep clicking a button and it keeps happening multiple times. Remember, it costs you money to run these things. They are hosted on the cloud, so it means that you need to limit when somebody is using it unnaturally, maybe using a bot to try and access it. It will cost you money. And for example, if that particular logic is a core architecture in your app, for example, in my own app, if a user writes that they want to build a particular app and they click generate, that's a very core aspect of our app, because it costs money to generate this service, which I'm using AI services. Now, the problem here is that I will now lose money. So I need to rate limit. For example, you can see VisualPRD already generated a rate limit, a rate limit mechanism, a very simple one. Do you understand? Now, you can come up with one. So all you have to just say is add rate limiting to all API endpoints. But even with this, you can't just tell. Remember, I told you, don't give your AI agent a very large task. If you already have a large code base, don't come and say add rate limiting to all the endpoints alone. You have to mention them. So maybe you have one AI agent that will say, oh, please, can you look through my entire code base and tell me all the API endpoints I have, right? You can run that prompt multiple times and collect a list, because if your code base is very large, the AI has limit, input limit, output limit. So everything it gives you might not be everything that it has accessed at once. So that is one way to do it. Or you can ask it, how can I make sure I read through my entire code base? What's the best strategy? Do you understand? Because it has limits. By the time you have that list, you can answer, okay, add rate limits to this, add rate limit to that. That's the best way. You don't build blindly when you're working with AI. Do you understand? So now, I've already explained this. Now, the next rule is authentication. Who can do what? Right? So use proving libraries. Now, I'll say this. Most people try to build their authentication from scratch, and that makes no sense. There are a lot of libraries. Now, a library is already, let's just call it a package, right? Just the same way you want to do something, you download an app, someone has already built that, and then you use the app. Same thing in the app development space. You can get different apps or different platforms that people have already built and use them in your app, because they've already built. And if somebody has already built that particular thing, they've already given you or created all the tools necessary to make sure that thing is secure, works perfectly. Most times that's how it works. If you yourself focus on building that thing yourself, you might be blindsided because you don't have enough expertise. So a lot of libraries like Firebase, Supabase, Auth0, etc. already have the structure that you need to just plug and play into your app. So you can just use a prompt like implement authentication using this. Do you understand? Or if you're using VisualPRD, once you click the button to export to your AI agents are automatically going to know what to do in that particular section, right? Now, never let your AI invent its own auth system. Never do this. Then here's the good part. Because you're already building most of your functions as APIs, most of these platforms like Firebase or Supabase already have authentication mechanisms. Like when I say authentication mechanisms, I mean they already have ways to verify that a user is a logged in user, is a real user. So you can use those methods and tell your AI agent to use those methods to verify that this user should have access to your API, your backend logic. So all those logic are hosted on the cloud. You can say, okay, make sure that this user has the right access to it, or create the most secure mechanism for them to have the right access to these sections or to these systems. And with this, asking questions like this, but broken down, don't just tell it to scan the entire app and you think it's going to work. You have to break down the task. If you break it down like this, what will happen is that your app, it will prevent hackers from being able to spam any of these endpoints. I'm telling you. These are the secrets you need to understand. So you can also now, with this, with having good auth libraries, you can even separate different roles. You can tell your AI agent that, okay, admins can get this as access, or normal users can get this as access, or even users that have paid using its authentication mechanisms can get this access. And you can, once you break things down, you can always ask your AI questions like, okay, what is the most secure way to handle this particular functionality. For example, now, okay, if your user is a pro user, user is actually paid for a particular function, how can I make sure that only those users can access this endpoint? Now it makes it much more easier. First, because your backend logic is separated from the front end, it's easier to manage all these things. Trust me. Now, the next rule is deploy logic to the cloud. I've already said this about the API, sending everything back to the cloud, etc. It's an important logic, right? Now, the next thing is ask this after every AI step. How could someone break this? This is my golden method for someone who's vibe coding. If you're using a very good model, after it runs a step, you can ask it, how can someone break this? And to tell you, the AI will answer you to, it knows attack vectors even better than most security experts, right? And it can even search the internet for the best patterns at that moment. So you can tell it, okay, search the internet. I think these are things you can do, right? So it won't just volunteer the info unless you ask, curious builders build secure apps, lazy builders get hacked. Thank you. That's so if you're curious, that's why some of my videos, I keep saying, stay curious, stay curious. If you're curious, you can make sure that every single time it's done with a task, you ask it that question. But here's the thing. It will majorly work when you've broken down the steps for your AI, not telling it a full, like, oh, build this entire thing, or build this entire thing and check this entire function, or check my entire app. How can someone break it? It will give you good answers, all right. But it will still miss certain things, depending on how big your app is. It has limits, like I said. Do you understand? So break down the steps. How can someone break this? How can someone break this? Beautiful. Final 2, 5 non-negotiables. Let's just end with this. All your sensitive logic or major functionalities in your app should live in backend APIs, not the front end. Now, no, this is something that most people keep talking about. It's very known, right? No secrets should be coded in your code, things like that. Beautiful. Now, funny enough, if you are even using backend APIs to run multiple functions, do you understand? Right? That already has even saved you from a whole lot. So for example, let's say you are running an API call to OpenAI. If you're going to use OpenAI to run any kind of API function, you're going to need an API, and they'll give an API secret, right? If you host that on your backend logic, you're even more secure than when you now say you put in your front end code. But now that's not even the way to do it. There's something called environment variables. Do you understand? You can ask your AI agent, how can I host this my API key, API token in an environment variable? Depending on the kind of service you use, there will be a secure way to store that API key on the cloud. That's mostly where it's going to be stored. So as your API logic is running, it will access that logic from the cloud. Now, this sounds like a lot of technical things I'm spitting, but you just ask your AI agent about it. But break down the tasks. That's the secret. Break it down, ask the question. Now, so all user inputs validated on server, use proven auth libraries, rate limiting on all endpoints, especially login. Now, security is not a habit. Sorry, security is a habit, it's not a feature. You don't need a cybersecurity expert. You just need the right architecture from day one. Right? So for all the links, I have I'll link them down below. I have my Telegram community. I have VisualPRD.com. It helps you from $5 per month. You can already generate a full technical blueprint without having to worry about many of these things when you're vibe coding, and it helps you build fast because you're exposed to your AI agent. So see you guys on the next video. I hope this helped you.